Howdy, howdy. We are live on a Friday night, and we are closing in on that final season premiere of Star Trek Discovery. Dave, we are within the final 2 weeks, less than 14 days away from the last last spore drive arrival of the disco for a new season.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like it'll still have some element of legacy that will continue on, but the big hurrah, the crew being all together, that's it.
Well,
It continues to be an emotional roller coaster.
we do have 4 past seasons to reflect on, and we have a guest that will be joining us. So I think we can
Hmm.
go ahead and get the show started. I see some people in the live audience.
Let's do it.
I'm Fathery,
This is Dave.
and this is Tex-Trek.
Engage.
Welcome back aboard the Starship Texas for the 279th installment of the Tex-Trek podcast, the home of Star Trek fandom from deep in the heart of Texas, where we take a deep look at Star Trek, old and new. And tonight we are talking about Star Trek Discovery, seasons 1 through 4, the entire show's history up until now, and all of our favorite highlights, things, contributions to the Star Trek franchise, anything we want to talk about in Disco that we appreciate. It's just a big old Discovery appreciation celebration.
Yeah, broad spectrum.
And Dave and I are lucky enough to have our friend from the BQN podcast network, Miss Amy Nelson, joining us. Amy, how are
Yay.
you doing?
Hi, I am doing so great. Thank you so much for inviting me onto your amazing show.
Oh,
279, that's pretty awesome.
thank you so
I
much.
bow.
Woo!
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to be here, and you have a lot of podcast experience under your belt. You've been podcasting the entire time Discovery's been around. I remember like Disco season 1 when I was listening to other Trek podcasts to see what are other people saying about this new Star Trek show. I remember you were doing a show at that time called the Edge.
And postcards from the edge.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I wrote into there one time. Y'all, I think y'all actually like read some of my
Of
comments over
course.
there. So
Yeah. It was fun. Just the excitement to have Star Trek back on the airwaves. And
yeah,
I was doing the viewers response show, and it was super fun to see what everyone had to think about it.
well, I want to ask you more about your Star Trek fandom and let you tell us a little bit about yourself before we talk about Discovery in just a moment. I got a little bit of quick housekeeping to do. I have to give a big thank you and shout out to the wonderful Tex-Trek Patreon supporters. That's Starfleet, Sohel, Cake is Eternal, Crazy Dutchie, Joanne Robertson, John Daw, Geek Filter, Quark Spar, Stephanie Durantas, Matthew Averett, Braxton, Chuck A, Joel Valisock, and our anonymous supporters. We do like to celebrate with a monthly Patreon watch party every month, and we have one coming up on April 13th. It's going to be a big one. We're going to do a Star Trek movie. We're actually going to do Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. It's the 40th anniversary this year. That happens to be my all-time favorite Star Trek movie. I know I'm a minority, but I think there's a lot to love in the Leonard
I don't
Nimoy
think there's not.
directed Search for Spock.
I don't think there's a lot of hate for it. I'll say that.
Yeah. I think
I
people
think
just
people are generally pretty on
when you're
board.
sandwiched between 2 and 4, it's hard to stand out, you know.
Yeah. But there are somehow a few pretty notable things that happen in it. And by the way, our last watch along was a very fun time as we celebrated St. Patrick's Day with
With Up the Long Ladder.
Up
Yeah.
the Long Ladder. Oh boy. That That was
That was a
fun.
fun one. But yeah, it's always a fun time. A great group of people that show up for the
Hmm.
Patreon watch parties. So I'm really looking forward to that on April 13th. That's also around like my birthday, so I feel like I'm having like a birthday party with all of y'all. So
So,
really
yeah, you
looking
got to
forward
remind
to
us,
it.
and it's your favorite, so that's a present to you too, Father.
Uh, but yeah, that will be on Saturday afternoon, April 13th. You can come into the Patreon as little as $2 a month, and if you can afford to be more generous, there's additional perks as well. But $2 a month will get you into all the monthly watch parties, and it's a good time to join now because in May we're gonna have multiple watch parties. There's some speaking of birthdays, there's some birthday celebrations that we're doing for some Patreon supporters. So be sure to check that out and join and attend those watch parties. But as far as Star Trek Discovery goes, all four previous seasons, looking forward to talking about this with Miss Amy Nelson. So you currently have what, two Star Trek podcasts that you're doing, or no, three? Yeah, there's three podcasts that you're on right now.
Yeah, ish. Take a
Keeping
break now
busy.
and then.
Yeah.
And
So
that's all on
over
the
on, go
BQN,
ahead.
right?
Yeah, on BQN Podcast Network. So we're doing right now live, which was my very first live show called The View Screen. And we have our very last bonus episode for season one where we're going to do a discovery in collaboration with Strange New Pods, their last day of Disco Festival. And so we're going to have a view screen dedicated to Discovery. So more talking Discovery. But then that ends that season. And then I'll pick up All Good Things, which is sort of my normal every week podcast. And then Union Federation, which we cover the new Trek and the Orville when it was. But so now it's just a new Trek. So I will be, when there's new Trek, doing two podcasts a week.
Have you had a nap lately? Are you feeling okay? It's a lot to juggle.
Well, I sort of like took some time off of work. I'm sort of changing flows. So I've got a little bit more time to be focused on podcasting.
Hey,
And I enjoy
it's a
it. I
fun.
love it.
Yeah, it's a fun thing to be immersed in. I was talking with someone the other day, and I realized I've been doing some sort of podcast more before this, more comic related stuff for off and on for like the last 15 years, and I still do a weekly one with our with the comic and game shop I manage, and it's yeah, when you're talking about stuff you like, it's good
Yeah,
times.
it is.
And Amy, I mentioned that you've been podcasting on this entire modern era of Star Trek Discovery and all the shows that have followed, but just a little bit more about yourself and your relationship with Star Trek and your personal fandom experience. Kind of what was your fan experience before this modern era? What were the shows that you were into, and when did you become a fan?
Well, I am definitely a TNG baby. My mother in, my gosh, high school, 88, 89, said, "Hey, come sit down." It was Sunday night, 6 p.m. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I like this show." So I watched it here and there, but you're going to school and university. But in 2000, when the TNG DVDs came out, that's when I was all in. I was like, give me Star Trek. I went to the library. I was checking out books, reading everything, just consuming anything TNG. And that's where my love started. And then I started podcasting in 2016 at the end of the 50th. Is November of 2016 is when I started
Hmm.
podcasting, and I've been doing it ever since.
It's nice when Trek is like there for us. You're talking
Oh,
about like when you did the big deep dive, and sometimes it's just like a really fun time to fill your life with something Star Trek. But also sometimes it's like people will hit Trek when they're not feeling great, and it's there for you. Trek is a hug sometimes.
yes, it
That was an
is.
exciting time when the Berman era Star Trek started releasing on DVD box sets. I remember that was the first time I ever saw an entire season of a television series collected in like one box that you could purchase. That was revolutionary at the time.
Size was scaling down.
Yeah. Because before that, they had been putting out TNG on like all those VHS tapes. They only had like two per tape, 2 episodes per tape.
And the special features and the commentaries, like I
Mm-hmm.
just consumed it all. I could not get enough.
And
Yeah.
still can't, so it seems. But that's good.
Yeah, well, we're happy to have you here. Just talking about like Discovery itself, and you mentioned that was a very exciting moment in 2017, just getting like new Star Trek again after it felt like we were starved for so long. But I guess let's talk about just like early Discovery a little bit, and just kind of when it like first arrived. It was so different from any previous show. It was a bit jarring, I think, for a lot of fans. But in a way, that's kind of a Star Trek tradition, right? The TNG actors famously talk about how no one appreciated them when they first showed up, and I remember in the '90s, everyone complaining about Voyager and DS9 not being as good as TNG or the original series.
Here's a quick question, and I think I already know the answer to this. Is there any Trek series that when it from the get-go was just like pretty much completely accepted? The only thing I can think of that kind of falls into that is maybe Lower Decks. And I know not everyone was on board, but like I feel like it was pretty well accepted pretty quick.
I don't know. There's a lot of Lower Deck haters out there, I think.
I think to answer that question, in my opinion, I would say Voyager because Deep Space Nine was so radical. Ooh, it's a space, it's a station. It's not going anywhere, and we're going back to a spaceship. We're going back to the episodes more like TNG. I feel like Voyager was just super accepted, and everyone was happy to be going back to a spaceship. So I think Voyager, in my opinion.
Okay. Father, I am one of those, arguably a Lower Decks hater, or more like a Lower Decks indifferenter. But I never got on board it completely. So, but yeah, like you're right. It's a Trek tradition. That fans are a little resistant when you get rolling.
But there's also, I think, a lot of in that kind of weirdness, the uniqueness of Discovery in kind of breaking format. I think that
Yeah,
there was
those
a
early
lot
elements
to.
that are who was it, the Brian Fuller elements definitely sort of stood out. Spore drives, a little more violent, a little bit more sweary, tardigrades, and
Violent, sweary tardigrades. I picture the tardigrade as the one like dropping f bombs
like
or
Ripper with a cigar, and
yeah, turning people inside out and.
But Father, do you remember? I'm sure you do. That I had a tough time with those first two episodes.
You really didn't like the first two at all, the Shinjo episodes, which I appreciate them more on. I was kind of indifferent on those. I was kind of like I'm not. I need more of the show to figure out how I feel about it. But like going back, I've always kind of liked those more on rewatch. To the point to where like I kind of wish that we had a Philippa Georgiou Prime Universe captain of the Shinjo show, and Michael Burnham and Saru, serving under her command. Or I kind of wish we had more than just the 2 episodes of that.
I had trouble connecting with their bridge crew, early on, and I wanted that family vibe to start building, and that didn't happen for me until the third episode when Michael gets onto the Discovery. How about you, Amy? Were you kind of in there immediately, or did it take a little bit to get you on board, or what?
Well, it was told to us that these 2 episodes are going to be like this little prologue. So I was prepared to like, okay, this is catching me up. What's going on? But yeah, in my rewatch, I definitely prefer starting at episode 3. Like I skipped 1 and 2. Well, because I had recently seen it, but yeah, those first 2 episodes, they're good, but I really like it with Lorca for season 1.
A lot happens in that third episode. I when I was kind of going through this, I didn't do a full rewatch, but I forgot the first appearance of Ripper the tardigrade too. I mean,
The first appearance of all the Discovery
everybody.
crew.
Yeah.
Like big scenes for Tilly, Stamets, Lorca, and all of which, actually, when you look back, I'm like pretty solid. Yes, they still had to find their place, but Stamets, had his persona for that first season more prickly. Tilly was Tilly, I think, right from the beginning. And Ripper, of course, was Ripper right from the get go, shredding people in there.
But I think Lorca was probably a big highlight for season one for a lot of people. I'd be curious if anyone in the live audience watching has any other big highlights from season one that stand out to them and their memories. But just talking about like Lorca, Jason Isaacs' performance, that was such a big mystery because we were all like, what the hell's going on with the Starfleet captain? There's something weird about him. And I think that was kind of frustrating for some people who didn't want a long form story arc, drawn out mystery in Star Trek. They wanted, no, I want to have like a weekly planet adventure, give me a planet of the week this week and then a different story next week. And they were a little frustrated that they were having to deal with this different format, but a lot of people I think enjoyed Jason Isaacs to the point to where there's a big demand for like find Prime Universe Lorca, bring Jason Isaacs back to Star Trek.
He was a very charismatic captain. He had some of that play by his own rules kind of vibe to him, but there was also the mystery of what was going on in there. He was. I think. And Trek viewers, I think, are trained to look to the captain, even though the show was kind of trying to differentiate itself and have Burnham be the central character but not be the captain, which I think was a good idea, although it's funny it ended up settling. That's where we still landed. but
that was always the intent. I think Brian Fuller wanted to get her in the captain's chair eventually.
Mm-hmm. But
I remember.
I was just going to say, that's why I think when we saw Lorca, it was like a little bit of a life preserver if you weren't quite feeling what was going on before. And I think people like Michelle Yeoh, but that was all chaos over there. And there was at least the stability of a sort of a ship that was running as, without a war going on. And so Lorca got to be a little bit of a stabilizing influence on early Discovery, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
In 2018, I went to the FanX Poe in Salt Lake City, and Jason Isaacs was there, and he was asked multiple times, would you come back to Discovery? What's going? And he loved it. He was like, yes, I would so come back. And so I still am hoping that we get Jason Isaacs. I absolutely love him. But yeah, his character was very frustrating, and that's what we loved about him. And like his relationship with Burnham and like how he treated the crew. And I just found him so fascinating and so different that it was really shocking to my system. And that's why he's memorable.
It's interesting to go back and rewatch that knowing what we know. Knowing that he is a mirror universe infiltrator.
It is so different. Yes, knowing what we know, seeing it again.
And knowing his relationship with Burnham and how big of a creep he is.
Yeah, that makes it a little harder to like him. but
we're not supposed to like him. The big arc of season one is you think like, oh, maybe in times of Klingon war, maybe we need this different type of Starfleet captain. Maybe we need like this tough guy like Lorca. And then you realize at the end, like, no, that's like crazy evil mirror universe talk. Like that guy's no bueno. He's bad. He's a creep.
Yeah, sometimes we get somebody like Shaw on Picard who's, a kind of obnoxious person, but ends up being, yes, this is actually somebody we're going to grow to like, and they're going to grow a little bit. Lorca ended up not being that guy. But somewhere out there is possibly a Prime Lorca, so...
So Jill in the comments says, Michael owes her career to Lorca. Discuss. Jill, you are spot on. The fact that he brings her back and like pushes against Starfleet, it's like, I have the right. We are in time of war, and I have the right to call any officer, to call any person to work with me, and I'm calling this person. So yeah, we have Burnham because of Lorca.
Michael Burnham would have ended up doing prison labor in a penal colony, had this crazy guy from the mirror universe not wanted to abduct her and put her to work on his ship because he had a relationship with her in the universe he came from.
Yeah,
it's a bit weird to think about it like, oh, thank God for Dockers, but but yes, it's arguably that's he moved he was moving chess pieces around, and that ended up bad actually ultimately for him. He ended up miscalculating there, but it is true. Yeah, that's how it happened. I forget, she was in the penal shuttle. They were going off to prison.
Mm-hmm.
What drew her exactly to disco?
The disco came to them.
Mm-hmm.
Did they have like a breakdown, or did they literally just fly?
No,
up and
they
say,
saved them from the nebula that was eating up their shuttle.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Yeah, I remember early confrontations and stuff with some of the, there were some prisoners that came on disco and made a fuss.
Yeah, that was all in that same episode. Context as for Kings. Just to I guess jump away from season 1 a little bit, but still talk about characters and performances. We get a very different captain in season 2 with Anson Mounts Pike. It gave us Anson Mounts Pike, so we have to credit season 2 of Discovery with that.
I mean, huge. That's huge, and it's an interesting experiment too, because it was a season that was a test drive for its own show.
Okay.
What else is? Well, go ahead, Amy.
Okay. Are we doing like season 1 moments? Because I have one.
We're doing all moments.
Season 1 stuff
you can
too.
Season 1, season 2, season 3, season 4, anything in Discovery.
Freeform.
Okay. Well, because I was like, okay. I just really want to point out season 1, as we sort of were talking, like they are getting to know each other. And what I loved about it is that they're sort of snippy with each other. Like Burnham is like telling Tilly how to become a captain because she thinks she knows best. And there is this totally funny quote that I so loved that made me laugh. And like Burnham and Stamets were in engineering, and Stamets was blaming Burnham. Well, this is all your fault, because she caused the war, Klingon War and stuff. And Stamets is like, what are you doing with your mouth? And she's like, I am swallowing the urge to set the record straight. Like the writing in season 1 was so good, so back and forth, and just getting to know each other. I really love those episodes from like season 3 up to Mirror Universe. Those middle episodes are my favorite of season 1 for that reason.
And while we're talking about the Father, slightly, but before we get back to Pike, I'll say one thing about Lorca that's a season 1 thing. I think one of their funniest scenes, and it is darkly funny as season 1 tended towards, was Rainn Wilson, Harry Mudd, montage of killing him.
The murder montage, yeah.
Yes, the what is it? Magic to make the sanest man go mad.
Yeah, which is another fun thing I liked about early Discovery is the episode titles. They tried, like TOS had these. Dave and I talk about this a lot because we're both big TOS fanboys. But TOS had like the best episode titles, like these very like. I don't know. They're just like when you hear something like the Savage
Devil
Curtain,
in the Dark,
or Devil in the Dark, the Enemy Within, Balance of
the
Terror.
world is hollow, and
for the world is hollow, and I've touched the sky. Yeah, there's something kind of
poetic,
just enticing and poetic, and beautiful. And I feel like DS9 tried to do that a little bit, kind of after Ira took over in season 3. We would get some stuff like Tears of the Prophets and stuff like that. But I think that early disco really tried to. And, we got away from like the boring, TNG episode titles that are just kind of, like a single word, like,
the wounded, the hunted.
Wounded. Yeah.
Yeah. Context is for kings, and
Butcher's knife cares not for the lamb's cry.
Yes, that's
almost
beautiful.
Maybe a little overly on that one. That was maybe a little.
But like
stretched.
the Vulcan Hello, like when we first heard the first 2 episodes are called the Vulcan Hello and the Battle at the Binary Stars. I'm like, oh, those sound like exciting titles. I want to know what those stories are about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Vulcan Hello is actually a great title.
Yeah, it's kind of mysterious. Like Vulcan Hello, what the hell could that possibly mean?
Now, Father, you mentioned Pike, and I think like I was just almost instantly on board when Pike rolls up onto the bridge and he introduces himself and asks the rest of the bridge crew to introduce themselves. That's one of my very favorite Pike scenes ever.
And it was such an injection of a new energy and vibrance into the show that like from that scene on until I think now going into season 5, it was like it never left. It's kind of like you have like pre-Pike disco and then Anson steps on that bridge, and it turns into post Pike disco. The show is always, I don't know, it kind of like that mirror universe, whatever grim dark lingerings from season 1. I'm not necessarily like saying that stuff was bad. I kind of like having like that variety of flavor mixed in the blend, but like all of that was kind of like shooken off as soon as Pike stepped on that bridge, I think.
Yep, something about him just called back not just the imagination of the viewership, but I think the writers took them back to, TOS, TNG, the idealism side of it. Although in season 1, I have to say, one of my broad listings for like favorite scenes, over all these seasons is Saru and his speeches, and I think he's my favorite character pretty clearly. And in season 1, when they're in the mirror universe, I loved his short rallying speech before they went after big time Lorca and his like that giant capital ship. And when he says, this is not Lorca's ship anymore, this is our ship, and today is her maiden voyage. That's one of my favorite scenes, and that that had elements of classic Trek too. There was some Pike in that, but before Pike.
Yeah, that's kind of the first glimpse of Captain Saru, of like good leadership Saru. I guess we saw him like kind of struggling with command early on, but this is the first time he ever seemed in command and confident about being in command.
It was nice to see an arc that he was not that person in episode 1.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Amy, what do you think about Saru and Doug Jones's performance as Saru overall?
Absolutely love it. And especially in season 2 with the whole Kelpian and his threat ganglia. I remember people were just brutal first round. But in my rewatch, it really shows this beautiful arc of him developing and coming into his own and pushing past boundaries that you didn't even think was possible. Like, it's just an analogy for us in our lives. What did we think was impossible, but yet when faced with it, pushed through and came out on the other side stronger and better. Like, that is so beautiful for Saru to tell that. And then we get to see it with Pike's like, I don't think that you would have made that decision before. And he's like, yeah, you're right. He's like, yeah, we don't handle violence. Like when Tyler and Culber were fighting,
Yeah.
And Pike's like, no, we don't do that. And I understand why you thought that, because now you feel empowered and you're not this afraid anymore, but we're not going to do that. And so I just really enjoy that exploration that Saru has with his arc.
Yeah, if people recall the fight between Culber and Tyler, because Culber was like, you snapped my neck and killed me, and now I'm back, and I have a lot of emotions I need to process, and I'm gonna beat your ass right now.
In like the cafeteria
in the mess hall,
right?
And Saru is like, let them fight. He's like the Godzilla meme. He's like, let them fight, and Pike is like, no, like, no, we don't do that. But that was when Saru was like, Doug Jones had to explain this before I understood it. But I heard like Doug Jones explain in an interview that like post Gangula Saru, he went through like an angry teenager phase, kind of like the second half of season 2. He's kind of like angry teenager, and then he kind of restabilizes, I guess, like going into season 3 when he has to step up and be the captain without, Daddy Pike is gone. He's back in the 23rd century, so Saru has to mature and become the grown up. And when he does that, you kind of see like in season 3 he starts to become a softer commander. He softens on people. He becomes more kind of paternal and kind of more of like a comforting type leader.
Father, early on we talked about this, and I think it was how they originally wanted to stage his relationship with Michael was as like the kind of brother and sister with a sort of rival,
right, sibling rivalry, yeah.
But as he like kind of went through those teenage years and kind of matured, he took on, it was as if he kind of aged beyond older, and then he felt like now when they see each other and they hug and they have this they reconnect and things like that, I feel like he's like a father figure. That's interesting. I think that's a good growth that wasn't necessarily spelled out throughout the show, but that is where things landed.
Yeah, and I think that their relationship really changed a lot in season 1 when they are betrayed by Lorca, and it's like, Mom is dead. Giorgio's gone. She was our captain.
Right.
She always had the answers before, but she's gone. And then our stepdad betrayed us. It turned out he was not a good guy at all. So you and we're gonna have to mature. We're like big brother, big sister. All the other kids on the ship aren't gonna make it unless you and I step up and work together and put all of our rivalry stuff aside. And they do that. And then like in season 2, when Michael is watching Saru, they think he's gonna die. We see how like tore up she is, and there's something there that kind of always confused me, Dave. I don't know if you remember, but when we talked about season 2, I always thought it was like weird when she's telling him like, of all the souls I've encountered, you're the most empathic, and that always seemed like weird to me. I was like, it felt like I felt like they were changing course with Saru. They weren't going to make him like this anxiety riddled, like constantly scared, a predator type alien that he was in season 1. They were going to do something like very different. But just rewatching season 2 recently, I understood that scene more now. What they're trying to say is that like his fear sense, his like gangula sense of always watching out for threats. He has a awareness, and that if he stops being afraid for a second, he can actually like use that to be empathetic to the people around him. He can pick up on those vibes and stuff, and you can kind of see like that transition of like, oh yeah, after he does like gain the confidence, after he does kind progress past like that living in fear
Right.
all the time,
It's
he's
like,
able to
his
give so much
interaction.
more. Yeah, he's able to
His
give back
interaction
to
with
everyone
people,
else. Yeah.
fear is now out of the equation, or a much less part of the equation, and so he can kind of wrap his mind better around those things, be a little bit more of a complete human being for a Kelpian.
For a Kelpian, yeah.
Yeah.
But I never really connected all that stuff together. But it makes the early Saru that we get in like seasons 1, season 2 connect up to the guy that we see, dating President Serena or Tarina. Serena's his sister, Tarina's his girlfriend. But like later in season 4.
Yeah, I was just going to say we get that, and he's maturing and going through his teenage years and angst, and then he's being a better friend and a better commander. And then in season 4 we get this beautiful relationship with Tarina, and again that starts with season 1 and his personal growth.
Yeah, and they do tiptoe up. They are not. This is not a fast moving relationship.
Oh, I love it.
Oh, something else that I just thought of, trying to think of like other like cool actors and performances in Disco, but Kenneth Mitchell, we got what 3-4 different characters from him in Discovery. I know he did some other characters on Lower Decks too, but I think just in Disco he had 4. He was 3 different Klingons, and then Aurelio, the scientist in season 3 who worked for the Emerald Chain.
Yeah, a little bit of. Oh my God! Why can't I suddenly say his name? The actor who's everybody. In
Jeffrey Combs.
The little Jeffrey Combs there. Yeah. Pretty cool. A pretty cool legacy to have there.
Yeah, that was very interesting doing my rewatch, especially after the cruise, after his passing, and like, oh, there he is. Oh, there's Cole Shaw. There, a little painful, but then recognizing his brilliant acting behind all the prosthetics.
Oh my
Incredible.
God. Yeah, some of those actors, and by the way, just as a quick aside, jumping back to Doug Jones for a second, the physicality of Saru is a big part of what makes it, and everybody knows that Saru walk, which it actually looks like it'd be extremely hard to pull off with the waving hands, and walking around on whenever they need to show, I guess, the prosthetics that elevate his height and give him his little hoofs. So yeah, there's a physical quality to the character, and that I think honestly his height sort of gives him a little of the paternal thing. That's a little bit part of it. Is he, and he doesn't. He's sort of lean and he doesn't look threatening, but he looks like he'd give good hugs.
Well, Doug Jones famously loves to hug fans at conventions. So I've never gotten a Doug hug. Amy, have you gotten one?
Yes, I have.
Yay.
Well,
Yeah.
Thank you so much to Matthew Averett for the very generous $10 super chat in the live audience. Matthew says, mixed feelings about season 5. Excited to see it, but sad to see Discovery go. I feel like there is more character building to do. Sorry if this is off topic. And not at all,
off topic.
Matthew. And if anyone else has feelings on season 5 they want to share in the live chat, please go ahead. But yeah, I mean, I think that 5 seasons is a really like strong run for, especially for like a modern TV show. I think that there could have been, potential for more, but just I don't know, the way that the showrunner Michelle Paradise has talked about how she's feeling really confident that season 5 is going to be a strong ending for the show, and the little glimpses that we've seen. Dave and I have both seen the first episode of season 5, and we feel like it might actually be a good story to close things out on for what they seem to be planning to do for the season 5 arc. So we'll see, but I definitely understand being sad to go, but there's no reason why these characters can't show up in more like we just had like Star Trek last year that had Ro Laren running around and Riker and Tuvok and I'm gonna see the Voyager Doctor this year at some point. We don't know when. Netflix hasn't told us when, but I'm gonna see him on Prodigy at some point. So
Seven got a huge new lease on life.
Yeah.
Even Icheb was there briefly.
Yes. And Hugh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so I doubt we've seen the last of the Disco Crew. In fact,
I kind of agree though with like as we're revisiting it, I am kind of like, what maybe it should have gone 7. What that would have been kind of cool. We're probably going to see Tilly though, right? She's almost certainly going to be in Lower Decks.
Or the Starfleet Academy.
Starfleet Academy.
Yeah. Maybe Lower Decks too, I don't know. But yeah, Starfleet Academy.
Whenever the actors are asked, whenever any of these Discovery actors are asked, like, could you appear on that Academy show? They're all like, oh, yeah, I don't see why I couldn't. So they seem to think that, they seem to think that they're going to have an open door to showing up on there, that it might be in the same time period. I think it will be, but...
Can we talk about Laurel? And Jill has a comment that says, Vogue, Cole, and Laurel were enthralling.
Oh yeah, I remember Jill often says that she likes the season 1 Klingons that Disco had.
Absolutely. And Laurel is one of my standout characters of Discovery. First of all, for Mary Chieffo, I love that she still keeps coming to the conventions and the cruise. Like, she is there, huge, awesome for the fans. She loves us. We love her. So huge shout out to her. But her beautiful arc, and especially on my rewatch, noticing how strategic she is, where she is starting at the very bottom. Like, she's a nobody and she's like, oh, here's a Vogue. Maybe I'll hitch my train to his ride. But then that doesn't happen. Then she gets tortured by Cole. She gets captured by Starfleet and then ends up over there and all of a sudden becomes important. And then she has to give up her ultimate sacrifice, in quotes, of her child and, disowning Vogue and not having Ash Tyler there, and becoming this chancellor and mother and uniting the Klingon houses. What a beautiful story arc for Laurel. And to see her go from season 1 to season 2, she's like my all-time favorite character for those 2 seasons. I love Laurel. Did I miss anything? I think it's good.
Yeah, that's a great encapsulation of it. The Klingons come. Do they show up to help in the battle at the end of season 2?
Yeah, the end of season 2 and Such Sweet Sorrow parts 1 and 2. And Laurel has that really cool moment in there. I really love watching Mary Chieffo's acting when they're watching Michael Burnham in the Red Angel suit go into the wormhole, go into the future, and the Discovery following her. And Ash Tyler is watching the view screen, and he's sad because he's in love with Michael Burnham. There goes the love of his life, flying away out of his life, out of the 23rd century, into the future. And he's so sad. But then you see behind him, Chancellor Laurel, staring at him, being so sad, like, oh my God, he really was so in love with Michael Burnham, and I never stood a chance, and I'll never have him, and he's as lost to me as Michael Burnham is lost to him. And it's a really painful, tragic moment, and it's all just conveyed through Mary Chieffo's eyes. That sells it all to the audience.
Yes, and she has that realization a little bit before, but sometimes it takes multiple times of getting kicked in the face that, yeah, this guy doesn't like you. And she has that, like, when Ash Tyler's there and she's with him and like holding his hand, and she's like, "We were together, we were love," and he's like, "When you touch me, I don't feel that. I feel uh it's not
Violated.
violated, that's the
Right.
word." And her, again, her eyes, it's like a snap, and it's like, and she recoils back because she doesn't want to be that torture. Like,
Right.
she
Right.
loves, and that what they had back in season 1 was so real for her, and we get that in just that small moment. Like, again, her acting, and she said that on the cruise. She's like, "I've been told that I have great eye acting." I'm like, "Yeah,
Oh,
that's from
I
Laurel."
wasn't at the panel when she said that, but I'm glad
Yeah.
that people have told her that, because I mean, I'm clearly complimenting it here, so I'm glad it
Yes.
got
When you're
back
under
to
all
her.
that makeup too, and to be able to do that.
Yeah, like what
But
the
yeah,
hell
that's
else
it.
are you gonna do? You got
Yeah.
to become a good eye actor at
Yeah.
that point.
Well, there is an option, and that option is you're not a good eye actor, and the character isn't that memorable and all that stuff. But she was not that person.
Yeah.
Um, speaking of Ash Tyler, early on, it's funny. He's been so supplanted by Book, who's obvious feels so right. I think with Burnham, but early on, I was rooting for him, and one of my favorite scenes in the first episode, or not first episode, first season. I mean, Father, you remember, because I've mentioned it a million times, is the party scene in using magic to make the sanest man go mad,
Hmm.
and like aside from like there's actually lots of good stuff in there. Stamets kind of teaching her to dance or to and all that, and the stuff with Lorca's many deaths. But I always liked that party scene because it looked like a bumpin' party. It was fun to see characters like Tilly drunk, poor awkward Burnham trying to come to terms with. At that point, she was just wrapping her head around her being attracted to him, and maybe something more. But she was like that, had that Vulcan reserve that was not ready for it yet. But anyway, that I always really enjoyed the party scene in it.
I enjoy that Michael could have like that good like awkward first relationship with Tyler, so that she could like work all that out and figure out how to be in love with someone, and then could be in a much better relationship, or I think like a more entertaining, funner to watch relationship that I get more
For
invested
sure.
in with Book in season 4.
The
But
only thing I like about Tyler and Burnham is when she's walking in the mess hall and he puts his foot on the chair to squish the chair out. That's the only thing I like about it. I can't stand them together. I don't like their
No,
chemistry. I don't like the acting together. It just falls completely flat to
well,
me.
now that I've sort of seen Book, I kind of agree. When you're in your like first season, there was this, and to some degree, it's like, oh, you put characters together that the writers clearly want to suggest have a thing. Sometimes I will go along for that ride, and I'm like, yeah, okay, that's sure, but it is true. It feels like a maybe slightly awkward first love, um, and that so it's kind of fitting that it's short lived. Though this was a far more dramatic first relationship, I guess, than people tend to have.
I don't know, like I get worried about like Michael and Book, like when they're on the outs, like when they are against each other in season 4. I'm really worried. I'm like, oh no, are they gonna get back together? And then I was like, all the stuff I guess in season 3, they have such good chemistry right off the bat that I guess they do kind of the cliche TV thing of like a will they, won't they, when like, oh, these two people were couriers together for a year and they were just friends though, but they clearly like each other, and who knows, maybe they'll get together. And I kind of don't like when they draw that out. We've all seen that story drawn out way too long on television, but I'm glad that they did like get them together. And then I thought they did interesting stuff in season 4 with like, oh no, maybe they're like when they do like the next phase of like the will they, won't they, that can get like so annoying in TV shows of like these couples that they break up and they get back together and break up and get back together. But I feel like they've handled Book and Burnham pretty well.
Okay, I did not see that as will they or won't they. I feel, and I agree, I think Book and Burnham are fabulous together. They have a good, solid relationship, especially after their year together that we didn't see. which I would love to see more of. And I think maybe some people could agree that they're just more like a buddy vibe, which
I think it was Boatrek who mentioned
yeah. Oh, Boatrek. Got it. Boatrek. But I wish, and I get it why Star Trek didn't do it, but I wish that there was more of that sexual physicality between them. Like, it's an adult show. I can handle seeing some skin on skin between Book and Burnham. And so when I see them in season 4, where they have this conflict, to me, it's just like, oh, well, they're having a disagreement. They're figuring out how to work it out. As in every relationship, you have to figure out how are you going to get through this one thing. And then they're going to be stronger on the other side. That's how I read season 4. Like, they are committed. They're together. Had we seen more physicality between them, I think it would have come across. But that's how I'm reading it in my head.
Well, sure. But I mean, like, when you disagree with your partner, and then like you hijack a ship and a weapon and you go off and you might like start like a intergalactic war, so you're kind of like, oh, like at somewhere in the back of your head you got to be thinking like, oh, this might break us up. Like, I don't know what this is going to do to our relationship. So
that there might be a deal breaker there.
yeah
It seemed like whenever they ran into each other, there was like, whether it was at council chamber meetings or at the what do you call it, the casino, that there was, they kind of rededicated themselves. They would say, oh, I don't want to do this. This hurts me. And so, yes, they seemed like they were still pretty tight throughout that. It was obvious that it was painful that they were on opposite sides of the issue.
Oh, I think that's why that relationship works so much, is that they give each other space. I think I might have mentioned this a couple of weeks ago when we were doing our season 4 retrospective, but I feel like Michael Burnham and Book both, they give each other a lot. They're both like big people that like move in like big ways, and they give each other like the space to like, oh, you do your, Starfleet, you're going to be like the badass Maverick Starfleet captain thing. I'm going to be over here like cool courier, might be kind of shady, who knows which way I'm going to break kind of guy. And we're going to respect each other and allow each other to be true to ourselves as like these big personalities.
It's almost given his, slightly, his sort of unlawful side, it's a little glimpse of the Picard-Vosh relationship if that had been pursued.
Kinda, yeah. It's a bit of that.
With him as the kind of wild one in this now, and her as, she is wilder than Picard too. She is a little bit more prone to dramatic swings. But yes, Vosh was from outside of Starfleet, and it's just a little, at least a little reflection of how that could have gone. You mentioned. That scene, I wish we had seen a little bit more, like you were saying, Amy, a little bit more adult romance in it sometimes. One of the things I liked about the party is that it looked like these guys were knocking a few back, and that there was probably going to be some shenanigans after hours after this party. Tilly, although she had always been awkward, it looked like when she had some alcohol in it, it calmed her down a little bit, and she was talking as if she had kind of gone through, and I'm not saying this in a judgmental way, a slut phase in the past, and this is like, to reclaim that, Tilly. She was, I liked that, and I thought that was fun, and I had hoped that we would see more of that from any given characters, but there's a little bit of, Disco is very wholesome sometimes, almost just a touch too wholesome. And by the way, Father, you mentioned Burnham and Book kind of giving themselves their space. That is an interesting also counterpoint to Culber and Stamets, who once they're together, minus one death for a short time, or some not too short a time, but they're pretty close. They're like a couple that
Oh yeah, they
they're
go
like
to
bed each other every night. Like,
your problems are my problems. Like we're gonna teamwork all of it. Yeah,
like
they're like that.
Or 1960s sitcom couple. They're in bed together. How was your day?
Yeah, totally, absolutely. But that's another like fun thing that a lot of people. I mean I don't want to speak for this community, but I've seen so many fans talk about the queer representation in Discovery being better than any previous Star Trek show, and Culber and Stamets, I think, obviously embody a lot of that. They're kind of like the elder gaze of the show, I guess, and then you have like the
Yes.
younger Gray and Adira, and also like Jet Reno being around. But there's some great scenes. I love like the friendship between Stamets and Reno, and how like they really like they don't get along, but they still kind of like each other, even though like they're so different. And they really like embody kind of like. Yeah, like they're very much representative of. It's kind of like, like the bitchy queen gay dude, and you get like the the stereotypical like kind of gruff butch lesbian woman over here. But I feel like people in those communities feel like they've been handled very well, and I know the show has gotten a lot of what do you call it, like so certain organizations have pointed them out as like, oh yeah,
Respect
Discovery.
and props.
Yeah, respect
Yeah,
and
from like
props
Glad,
for sure.
I suspect, and
Yeah.
some of the other ones.
Well, because it's not in your face. Well, okay. People say, well, it's in your face. And then people are like, it's not in your face. I truly believe, like you were just saying, those examples of Culber, Stamets, Jet Reno, like it's just, they're there, but the way that they are is representative. Like that's just who they are.
Right,
And
it just
then
comes
you
off as
get
natural. It's very natural and
Yes.
organic.
Yeah, and then you get, well, the Adira and
Great.
Gray.
that's pushed in your face. And I'm like, well, is it? I don't know. It was difficult having the Stamets Culber like be the parents and embracing them. I don't know that I don't know. That was just a little forced for me, but their characters I loved seeing. So I can sort of see it both ways. But yeah, for sure, Stamets and Culber, like amazing relationships. And I have a question. Who's Tark and Ford? Do you think that he was in a homosexual relationship?
Yeah, we talked about this briefly the other week since they didn't quite show it. But
Yeah.
Father, you were reminding me.
I mean, like
they
they're
were in bed
physically
together.
close. Yeah, like they're like, but I mean, like their bed is kind of like a makeshift cot because they're kind of in like their prison laboratory. But they're physically cuddling with one another. But I don't know. It could have been an asexual relationship. But when Michael Burnham tries to explain Tarka to the 10C. And she's explaining like, yeah, like my one who's like really dear to me, my one book, died. And the guy,
Right.
the reason this guy Tarka was so upset is like his one, the one really close to him, he was trying to get back to.
Yeah.
So in Michael Burnham's mind, the way it was explained to her, and I think the only reason why she knows this is because Jet Reno was taken prisoner on Book's ship, and she overheard all of this and must have explained it to Michael at some point during that episode. But I think Michael's understanding of it is Tarka loved that person, that individual, as much as she loves Book. So that was her read of it.
Right. Yeah.
I can't remember if I mentioned this at the time, but last week when we were talking about season 4 specifically, I mentioned I like Tarka, the unlikable character, with he's doing some extremely shady shit. But what it reminded me of, and maybe I did mention this way back when we first talked about it, was Harlan Ellison's original draft of City on the Edge of Forever, where Kirk did try to save. He was going, among other changes, he was going to try and save Edith Keeler.
Yeah.
Is that right?
And
At the
Spock
end,
would have to stop him.
and Spock had to stop him, and he was kind of like, "Screw the universe, screw everything. My love is going to define me in this key moment." And sort of Roddenberry was like, he's a man of duty, and that's the central difference. Well, Tarka is he is a man of love in this case. And I, yes, it's beyond dangerous, beyond reckless in many ways. And, I think you could argue he's toxified his kind of remembrance of that relationship. But it's interesting to me that it does reflect, like we put such a high premium on love at times, and that's what Harlan Ellison was interested in that story. And Tarka, at least to some degree, does reflect that.
Tarka reminds me of Soren in Generations, where he's trying to get back to the Nexus, and it's okay with him that he's going to live the rest of his life in a fake, made-up environment. That's what Tarka gives the vibes for me.
Yeah,
Very
unfortunate, very selfish.
Well, it is. Yeah, I guess he thinks he's gonna actually make it right to the alternate universe.
It's
I mean,
gonna be
by the
fake.
end, but by the end, I think he didn't make it. When he's like he wasn't sure he was gonna have like enough energy to cross over or not. But I think it was just he didn't have anything else to live for. So
Was it going to be fake? It was, or was it going to be like that's actually where his?
well, it was gonna be an alternate universe, but it was just gonna be like
wasn't that where his buddy escaped to though?
that's his assumption. He doesn't know that
Right.
for a fact. But when he went
Right.
back to the lab, he left the sign of like, oh, I went to the universe. So
Yeah, I figured he seems like he's a very calculating, smart dude, and that he would. At
he
least
is,
be
but
pretty
he's
sure-
operating a lot on faith. So that tells you a lot
Right.
about where his
Sure.
values are. You know that he'll compromise his intellectual values for his selfish.
Right. But I
heart
did like that
values.
as a counterpoint, maybe somewhat to the wholesomeness of Trek at times, of Discovery in particular.
But that is a
what's-
very that's a very common thing in Star Trek. It's something that Roddenberry is really focused on in the original series, and I think that's why you have like more Badmiral type characters show up. But the idea of like there is an ugly side to human nature, and it is something that we have to grapple with and deal with. Kind of like later Roddenberry in the 70s and 80s. Kind of I don't know. He kind of changed his philosophies a little bit, but early Roddenberry definitely wanted that to be reflected in the show, that man must always, or humanity must always be very self-reflective and self-critical.
Book lost sight of that in that last season that we saw. He was rolling with Tarka, and sometimes I didn't 100% buy him doing that, but I can't say that I've experienced having a planet destroyed.
Yeah, and the fact that it kept happening, that it was like a recurring thing, that like, oh yeah, somebody needs to like take action now. There's just like another 11 billion died. Oh look, here's like another several billion died. I can see that being like, okay, we're gonna have to do something quick. So that would be a motivating factor to take action, take a big swing, as the Strange New Worlds writers would say.
Let's see. What was I going to mention? Father, you had brought up since we're talking about relationships and love. One of my favorite episodes in I guess this goes back to season 2. What was the name of the one that where Pike that had Vina and it had the Telosians?
Oh, if memory
serves.
Yes, and they did that very cool opening recap that called back
that was
the
fun.
original series, which was such a fun thing to do. They got to reimagine all of that, and that is that the same one in which Pike finds out that what his future fate will be?
No, that came a little bit later.
That's with the time. Yeah,
that was when Kenneth Mitchell is an albino Klingon and gives him a crystal that shows that to him.
But I liked the cool thing about that episode, of course, aside from just the sort of nostalgic element of seeing a new interpretation of the Telosians, was that Pike was that we saw that this was a kind of his thing with Vina was real, and that we the viewers at least would know that he was for all the tragedy he was going to endure, that he would sort of get this.
Pike will eventually like go to heaven. Like he will go to Talos 4 and get to live with the woman he's in love with, and get to like live like any fantasy of the Telosians can create, like anything for him. Like Amy was saying, I guess like Tarka, it would still be fake, but I mean like that's
fake.
That's like, but like that's all. It's like at the end of his life, it's like you're not gonna have like anything else. So it's like
you have reality. You
interesting-
have reality. And okay, can we just talk about this? I was texting you, Fathery, while I was watching this. Okay, here Vina is and reveals to you, and how would you, as Captain Pike, this person who I thought that I loved, who I won't love anymore because they're creepy, created me and has been living with a version of me this entire time. And Geordi gets all this crap for recreating Leah Brahms. No, I don't think so. That is not cool.
Doesn't she say that the Telosians did that for her? Like she didn't That
She
wasn't like,
asked them because
oh,
she was
okay.
like, "Oh, I'm not. Oh, but then I want to be with him." Like how? And then how would you feel? Literally, like, oh, someone has been living with a version of me. Not cool. Creepy vibes. 100%.
So you think it's too Barclay style? Um,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What's that?
I actually think it would have been better if they didn't include that, because I've always been this is like a weird like canon debate that I would have to go on like a weird like canon tangent, but like old school like Star Trek rules used to be that the cage was non-canon. But like I don't know, around like 20 30 years ago people stopped talking about that. So
oh,
I
right.
don't know if it still sticks or not, but that was the idea, that like the cage was not canon because it didn't actually air. It wasn't part of the actual aired episodes. But that is the ending
Mm,
in the cage, that the Telosians create like a copy of Jeffrey Hunter for
right.
Vina to live with.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I didn't rewatch the entire episode, so I'm coasting a little on nostalgia for the nostalgia presented. I'm curious to rewatch it now and see what I think. I think to some degree, Vina had her own tragedy, and
Yeah.
I'd have to kind of watch it and see. I mean, we're into this weird Matrix type territory where it's like, is it immoral to live a fantasy? And or if so, how? At what point is too long to hold on to it. But also, I don't know, like, kind of what other life could have on Talos. To some degree, they originally set those chess pieces up in TOS, and they set it up so that they could get a particular result. They wanted to have Pike eventually return there and all that. And but yeah, I'll have to revisit that one. I'm curious.
Well, the original intent was that he wouldn't return, so
Right?
that's
Yeah,
why
yeah.
it
That
would
was
have
only
had
when they
that.
did the
It would have had that
menagerie.
ending. Yeah. So with the menagerie actually omits that like that never happened, and I was happy when that was the universe, but then Discovery came along and kind of added that back in there. Not a big deal, but it's just kind of like I kind of liked when that wasn't canon, but I guess it is. So
Out of curiosity, like what other episodes have stood out for y'all? Disco has a lot of large tapestry stories, and but like, and so there's not maybe as many specifically isolated episodes
it,
as we've gotten in other treks. But and what other ones for y'all?
just to highlight season 3, because I feel like we haven't talked about it
Sure.
much, but there was a fun return to the Trill homeworld
Mm.
in
Yes.
season 3, so I really appreciated that. That was another big highlight.
One
That was
that
when Adira was trying to draw back some memories.
Well, they were having to figure out what to do with the Trill symbiote, but the Gray passed to Adira
Right.
from Trill to a human, which was something they had to go to the Trill homeworld to.
Mhm.
But that was that was when they were trying to get back to Starfleet. So like they go to Earth and they find Adira, and then it's like, oh well, we need to get like your admiral memories, and then there's this part of like that quest that eventually gets them back to Starfleet when they meet Admiral Vance and see the post burn Starfleet.
Right. Right.
See, I think when you ask that question, like, what's a favorite episode of yours? It's too difficult to answer with this type of story form. Because when you say the Trill episode, but then there's so much that leads up to it beforehand that makes that episode so amazing, is the build up. So it's like when you say, what's your favorite episode? Like, it's almost like, what's a storyline that, you know, stands out to you? Otherwise, you're going to Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad, because that's an
Right.
episodic. That's a sort of, just this little bite of a story. It's so difficult answering that question in Discovery. One
Well, if
episode
you
of season 3 that, oh, hold on. One episode of season 3 that I do remember liking, and I haven't got there in my rewatch, so you'll have to help me out, but is this episode 2, Far From Home. And that was sort of a fun episode because we are getting the crew now in the future. Right. And they're like, the two Starfleet walk into a bar, or, it's this fish out of water story that I can relate to. And we're being introduced to where are they now? When are they now? And is that the first time that we see programmable matter up
Programmable matter.
close?
Yeah, I guess it would be. Yeah, because they have to
Yeah.
explain that.
Is that the
So
one with the mining station and all that?
yeah,
And the big glaciery.
I like that
Yeah. And they're
they brought back
walking and
the coordinates from Enterprise season 1 that Dave and I just covered a few months ago, but from the weird random episode of Enterprise.
Oh wow,
yeah.
I forgot about that.
The
But yeah,
Discovery does that sometimes. Every now and then, Discovery will do like a really like deep cut Star Trek alien.
well,
Mhm.
Father, what were the aliens that were in the examples episode?
Oh yeah,
It
they
was a
were from
colony.
they were from the Enterprise episode Civilization. The Akali.
Yeah,
But they
it
were
was
the
like an
people who
Akali
on
colony.
Enterprise, they're like Renaissance era. But then in Discovery in the 32nd century, they're, a space traveling member of the intergalactic community.
Looks like they evolved. Um, that episode that you just mentioned, Amy, had one of those Saru moments I really like when he and Tilly are going to that station or that outpost, and she's not sure why he brought her along, and I don't remember all the
Oh,
details of it, but
yes.
that's his. He said he's like
Hmm.
you and Tilly are a very good first impression or something like
Yes.
that.
That's when you really see
That's
him make
good.
like the shift to like the more
Hmm.
paternal, the softer type of, when he's leading by through compassion, like
Hmm.
when he's able to be comforting to the people he's also commanding. Early Saru
Hmm.
never felt like he was confident enough. He always had to be very stern.
Well,
Right.
and he was always second guessing himself. Like, what
Yeah,
are the characteristics of the best captains? But he
right.
was, trying to self improve. And now he's, had those seasons to
Yeah,
mature. Yeah.
the guy that you have who had that conversation with Tilly in season 3, and then the evolution that he goes on to commanding the Enterprise, or I'm sorry, commanding the Discovery in season 3, and then the stuff they did with him in season 4, and whatever will happen in the final season. But the guy that he turned into there wouldn't have tortured the tardigrade to try to save Lorca in season 1, like the younger Saru, the less confident Saru was doing.
Hmm.
It's a much more personal style of kind of leadership and crew interaction on Discovery, and like at the end of that episode, I believe when Burnham is reunited with them, right, and Saru gets the captaincy again. I think is that right? Or I remember seeing a scene where he's reclaiming the captaincy, and she like holds his hand while they're doing
Yeah,
it, and
when she comes back on board Discovery, because season 3 we
she's
get
just
the
arrived.
first episode of just her and Book, and it's just
Yeah.
like
Right.
all about that, and then they do the second episode of, okay, now Discovery lands in the 32nd century, and it's all about them.
Hmm.
And then at the end of that episode is when they all get back together.
But yeah, just that closeness, it is a little bit. There is more of a family element maybe to this than, even though there's the family element in all Star Treks, there's more to this one than the others, especially with, say, Culber and Stamets as their adopted dads for Adira and Gray, Zora becoming like a literal part of the crew. In the end, they look, it looks so different from the way, say, Lorca was running it in season 1, which
I'm
was,
happy for them though. Like they got
yeah.
away from that. Like if you go back and watch Context as for Kings, and I don't know, they kind of all seem terrified. Working for like this kind of madman general who just wants to like win the war, and he's just gonna like crack the whip. It's just like this old school commander. Yeah, I'm so happy for, like, now they get to like hang out in a bar and stuff. It's a much happier ship in later Discovery than early Discovery.
Although everybody is always processing trauma too. There's a lot of trauma in Disco.
Ugh.
Yeah, but season 5 looks to be a lot more optimistic and less tragic. There's been a lot of tragedy.
That's true. That's true. Speaking of, you were talking, Amy, about stuff with long buildups. Season 4 was that, long buildup to, they had a big bad, but in this case, the big bad wasn't so bad. It wasn't Control, and it wasn't Lorca or the Klingon Empire. It was a and some of my favorite episodes include like Rosetta and the actual, I think it's just called Species 10C
Mhm.
episode, where we did get to see them, and it was a little bit more that sort of 2001-ish vibe
Hmm.
of Contact or Close Encounters, Contact, things like that. So that was exciting to see, and again based on a whole season of sort of build up. So those episodes sort of they're still part of it. Although there were standalone episodes in there too, from Casino episode to the one I really liked, the examples with notable performance from Michael Grey Eyes as the
Hmm.
prisoner who stays behind. What about you, Fathery? Any episodes or arcs, I guess I'd say, maybe that stood out for you in the various
Um,
seasons?
the Sound of Thunder in season 2,
Mm-hmm.
when they go to Saru's homeworld for the first time. I was so glad that we actually got to see Kaminar. It was
Yeah,
such a missed opportunity that Star Trek
same.
Enterprise introduced us to like this really cool new alien character, Dr. Phlox, and oh, we had a new alien species, the Denobulans. I just kind of assumed, okay, at some point they're gonna, probably not in season 1, but at some point this show is gonna take me to the Denobulan homeworld, and I'm gonna get like a whole Denobulan episode. You know, that never happened. And that was, I don't know, I feel like that was like a big missed opportunity. We
It's a
still
little
have
odd.
never been to the Denobulan homeworld, but I'm glad Discovery did not make that same mistake. I think that would have been a huge omission if we never saw Saru's people and his culture, and I think that kind of helped, realize him as more of a character. And I like the story with the Baiul and kind of
That's
they
been
had
a
like this long
fascinating one.
historic conflict. I like it more now because I've seen season 4 when they all are thriving and getting along, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess they were able to work out a one state solution with equal rights for Baiuls and Kelpians, and I'm happy to see that was maintained as much as things got really bad during the burn, and the Federation almost completely erased. It was reduced from what, like 300 member planets to I don't remember. They had like 60 or 30 or something. Um, but Kaminar, they did not fall. They did not lose their peaceful, stable society. The Baiul and Kelpians continued to coexist. So I like
Because
that.
isn't there an episode in Enterprise where Archer, Dr. Phlox, and they won, and it was the two species on the planet, and then they were like, well, one's gonna die out and one's gonna, and then
Oh
which
yeah,
one do they help? Then that's the
right.
one
Because
that's,
there was a slightly
Dear
oppressive.
Doctor.
yes, that's
Yeah,
the
I
one.
like that one. Although you pointed out when we talked about it, Fathery, they somewhat present only a sort of binary solution. Do
Right.
you help the sort of slightly manipulative, controlling faction, or do you help the other? Or do you not help them and let the other faction essentially ascend and likely take over the planet over time?
So to
Um,
your point, Father, like to see them in season 4, when you know their history of that, it was the Kelpians that were, being bad to the Baul, and then the Baul became in control, and then they were being bad. So it's like this back and forth,
They
back and
tried to
forth.
erase history. The Baiul, when they're in control too. I thought that was interesting how they try to rewrite the narrative, and they're like, oh no, we're the predators now, and you're the prey, and we're supposed to be the dominant species.
Right. But I mean, you sort of can understand, when the Kelpians were so mean to him. So,
well, what's
and
interesting
mean is
about
too
that?
nice of a word, but you know what I mean. So, but yeah, to see that it's like, okay, again, that's just like, I love season 4. With that Trek philosophy of, yes, we, no matter what, we can get to be together,
We
I love
will
when they
be
show.
friends with the scary tar monster.
Well, yeah,
Yes.
they show the council meeting with where Saru is and everything, and the Baul are still scary looking. They're like floating in, like they're in a screen, or they're somewhere behind them. And they still look scary, but they have clearly integrated and they have their voice
Yeah.
in the council and everything.
That's when you got to remember what Trip Tucker's Vulcan high school teacher told him, that you have to challenge your preconceptions before they challenge you.
Good job, Trip's teacher.
Yay for teachers.
Yeah.
Teacher appreciation. But Dave, did you have any other episodes you wanted, or story arcs that you wanted to comment on?
Let's see. I mentioned Context is for Kings. I mentioned the examples. One I needed to rewatch, but I remember enjoying was New Eden. That's another kind of standalone
which
episode.
I'm convinced Akiva Goldsman wanted to do that as a proof of concept for Strange New World. He's like, look, this Anson Mount guy, he's going to be my captain, and we're going to do Planet of the Week type episodes like this. Here's an example. So
there you go.
Because that one was written by Akiva, and it was like I'm also very convinced that the season 4 episode, what is it, All Things Are Possible, or All Is Possible? But that was a proof of concept for the Starfleet Academy show.
Yeah, I think you're right. To be honest, I mean, it makes a lot of sense that they would do those. Those are cool episodes, but they also feel like, I can see that they would serve a very practical purpose too.
And the season 2 episode, Point of Light, I think they were kind of trying to do a proof of concept on Section 31. That was when they introduced Michelle Yeoh as the Section 31 operative, and they introduced Leyland before he was Control, when he was just a Section 31 guy.
Mm-hmm. Can I go on a love fest for Species 10C and that story arc?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh my gosh. It's going to take a while, so just sit back. But I freaking love this whole story from beginning to end of how do you deal with the unknown? And we get both sides, right? We get Tarka and Book, who are wanting to take on the aggressive. We're getting the Federation or Starfleet. I don't know. Is it Federation back then? Starfleet and Burnham. That's going to give them the benefit of the doubt because we don't know. How are you going to, deal with something that happens and you don't know the intent, which is what happens in our lives a lot. Like something happens to us. We don't know what is the intent. And like, how do you deal with your assumptions and that whole back and forth? And to have Starfleet and Burnham stand up and say, we need to communicate, period. We're not going to fight back. Even though we've lost this, we need to figure out the intent first. Like that is Starfleet. That is philosophy that I want to live by. And the fact, and so creative that they're having this Species 10C communicate in light and color and timing. Like, I freaking love it because how difficult is it to communicate with someone that's not like you? It's freaking difficult. And here they're not even using words. Like it's just insanity. And the fact that they use logic statements to get there, which is math. And I'm a former math teacher. The whole thing of season 4 and Species 10C, like I freaking loved. And I will excuse whatever other bad storylines you say. Season 4 is the best season of Discovery because of 10C.
So far. Season 5 might be better, but I agree with you. I absolutely love season 4. I heaped a ton of praise on it a couple of weeks ago when we were focusing on it, but yeah, that's a great point though. We got the hard sci-fi stuff communicating with the 10C, but it made sense for the theme of the story arc of season 4 of communication and how hard it is to communicate, especially when people are that different from you.
Yeah.
Well, there was a neat bit in the when they were in the council chambers and they had Federation people, but also non-Federation people there, and Book makes his case and Book makes her case. And, they played with the idea, of course, that Book gives a pretty moving testament. But in the end, even these people who have survived the burn, they have lived under the threat of and reign of the Emerald Chain and all of this, they still sided with Burnham. That's the reason why Book and Tarka had to go renegade and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Was because in the end the people did, they chose, let's try and communicate with them. That was still the priority, and that's some people who are under duress
Mm-hmm.
too. They've been living without dilithium for like 100 years or whatever
Yeah.
it's been.
Yeah, but I like what that says about, like, I don't know, that kind of has a larger, I guess, humanist message of, like, when you go like
Yes.
issue by issue, like the average person is actually, they're actually like going to be on the right side of a lot of stuff when you can break it down in like an honest framing. And that's an important thing, I guess, to keep in mind too when you have a hard time communicating with the people that are different than you. That, like, we do have like a lot of common ground. So, but yeah, I love how season 4, how like all of that stuff, it just works together so well. Discovery has
Mm-hmm.
kind of had like this weird kind of identity crisis. How could it not? Changing showrunners constantly. Brian Fuller didn't even make it into like shooting of season 1, and then they fired the season 1 showrunners early in season 2, and it took a while before Michelle Paradise could kind of actually like have reign over the show for a while and stabilize things. But yeah, season 4 definitely had a consistent story and tone and
Yes.
theme. But I
Yes.
also kind of like that Disco was so schizophrenic in the earlier years and was just kind of all over the place. I think it kind of added to the variety of weirdness that we've gotten in the show. So
So I found
crazy things like the sphere data, that like, and like now we have like this Zora ship, but that was like, I don't know, a very different thing in Opal for Charon in season 2.
Mhm. I've found it interesting that in this discussion, season 3 has been least talked about with storyline, and I happen to agree. I don't like season 3.
I think
That's funny. That's my least favorite season, I think, also.
I think to me, Control was maybe my least favorite threat, but I like the burn as a baseline concept, not necessarily as executed, but like as something, the powerful, galactic civilization that we had built found, was humbled by some sort of a natural thing of, essentially a shortage of resources. I think that's a cool idea that there was a setback for the Federation on a massive scale. Now I hate I hate the revelation about it. It's terrible. It's so, but I think I like that season maybe a little bit more than season 2, for the stuff in it that did work. I have actually always struggled a little bit with Michelle Yeoh's character, even though she kind of spiced up any given scene she was in. And also, she was like, she is a war criminal, and it was a little hard for me to completely put that behind me. And I was like, she was mean to Tilly and a lot of other people. That's not cool. I don't like that. So her kind of role, her doing Section 31 stuff was not my favorite thing.
Yeah, I said at the time, like, terra firma did a better job redeeming her than I would have thought possible. So I thought she was irredeemable. I thought, like, there's no way I'll ever be able to root for this character.
Was
And then
that
I
the
had
Guardian of Forever?
yeah, then I had to
episodes?
eat crow when we got through that, because I was like, oh, I feel like they convinced me that she's willing to atone for her sins and live a better life wherever the Guardian sends her to be in the Section 31 movie coming to Paramount Plus probably later this year.
Mm-hmm. Which I'm looking forward to. I really am.
Yeah,
I like
it'll be
Giorgio.
fun to...
Emperor or Captain.
Even when she's mean to them.
Yes.
Well, Dave, you often said that the show needed that extra bit of arch. They needed to have some Giorgio on the ship, but it was too wholesome without that.
And her jousting with Leland and Control, absolutely loved it.
Now I do think they needed that, but like she was almost like a little bit too much. It'd be like if you have Khan strolling around on your ship. It's like he's gonna be dramatic, and he's not going to
That
be wholesome.
sounds awesome. They should.
Right?
They should have. There should be a Star Trek story
No.
where like you're forced to team up with Khan, and he's got to be on your ship, and you got to figure out a way to make that work. That sounds like a good story opportunity.
For an episode or two, yes, but she had much more reign than that. So
No, she was only around a couple of episodes. And, you know, she is Khan type because it's Michelle Yeoh. Like, she's on screen, you see Khan. Like, she's just that huge, that magnanimous. Like, Michelle Yeoh is amazing. And she really is only there a couple episodes. Like, I really
know
could
that,
do
like,
a few more.
when she showed up at the end of season 1, they straight like she essentially given command of the ship by
Yes, but that was we were supposed to be uncomfortable with that. Like,
Right,
we were supposed to be like,
But that's kind of a big
Cornwell, what
thing.
the hell are you doing?
And then they connected her with Section 31.
Yep.
Right.
Well, that was after she went rogue on
too.
Kronos, and then 31 recruited her.
Yep.
But you know, when they're having to work with it, like she kind of stayed on as part of the crew. And listen, I love Michelle Yeoh. It's kind of a love-hate thing when she's around. I like her presence, but it's the part that feels least Star Trek-y to me. It actually feels like it's kind of grinding on the Star Trek principles. It's like if they had Jellicoe around all the time, or not all the time, but much more often. Let's say much more often. And I like Jellicoe too, by the way.
But like, what if you have like a Ferengi criminal as like a bartender as a regular on your show? Like, I think it's okay to have some of these very like non Starfleet people, some very
Yeah.
like people who are like very like not Roddenberry philosophies. I like having them on the show too.
You remember how Quark though was like, I'm not gonna commit war crimes for whoever that was who was trying to push him into that, but like that's already part of like Georgiou's history. She has eaten Kelpians. She has murdered and tortured millions. That always stayed with me as something that I felt like needed to be addressed, and was not to my satisfaction.
Well, maybe one day Dave will learn forgiveness.
Put her on trial.
But
I know Jill in the audience has my back. She's, I think, even less tolerant of me than.
no, you're definitely not alone with that sentiment. But she did bounce off of the show though. So if that was an issue for you, if you didn't like Giorgio on Discovery, then you're in luck post season 3.
Was she out in the entire season 4?
Yeah, she does not appear in any of
what was the best season?
After she leaves halfway through season 3. She stays gone.
I'm going into courtroom mode. I'm like, and what was the best season?
But yeah, I'll agree with you. It is 4, but I think you were right when you said that season 4 they needed someone to be a little bit of a jerk, and then we kind of got that with Tarka.
Yeah, sometimes I miss old Stamets even a little bit.
I think we're gonna get that with Captain Raynor, our new captain in season 5.
Right, that's like the other ship that they may work with or something.
Yeah. So, but speaking of that, he's a what are they called? Karanites? They were just in one episode of DS9, Armageddon games, but that's Michelle Paradise was saying that
This is the speculation
South
about
by
his alien race.
Yeah. So Michelle Paradise confirmed at the South by premiere when she was here in Austin that he is the race from Armageddon games. But I like how I was mentioning how Disco will occasionally have like these deep cut races, or they brought back for whatever reason the Lurians and Cardassians are like running around in season 4. It's like, hey, people like Deep Space Nine, so let's throw in some Morns and Gold Ducats running around in the background. But they did get like a little bit more like experimental, I guess, with like the Strange New Life and New Civilizations. When we have like the Giuseppe and the Mycelial Network, and Saru is so much more alien than most of our regular characters. He's just visually he's very different.
Yeah, only Linus kind of matched his quirky, his alienness, and Linus was kind of a bit more of a tongue-in-cheek character.
That was another fun thing with Linus, the Saurians, and like bringing in some of the motion picture aliens. And in season 3, they also have the Beetlejuicean, the rival courier. What was his name? Cosmo, I think that.
Yeah.
Book's rival.
Mm-hmm.
In the season 3 premiere. So.
I want to, Father. I want to quick mention having dissed George Howe. I want to quick mention a few, like one of the things that they do is big spectacle in Discovery, and there's a lot of action and stuff. And there have been several notable kind of cool action sequences, several of which George Howe's been a part of. In season 1, there was like a big old hand-to-hand fight in the corridor in the Mirror Universe with like her and Burnham versus Lorca's
the throne room fight is really...
Yeah, okay.
There was a corridor battle, and then after that they have like the throne room.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
The corridor battle had more phasers and stuff.
Yeah.
And then the second one had like knives and swords and martial arts. And she's always gonna rock that. She also got to... there was like a barroom fight with a dude in the beginning of season 3, whatever that episode was. It was episode 2, the one we were just talking about with the miners.
Far From Home.
Yeah, that dude had been like pushing her, and he was like phasering her on low power.
Oh yeah, and she's ready to fight someone.
And then it's always great to see Michelle Yeoh.
The fight with Leyland at the end of season 2, like I have a lot of problems with Such Sweet Sorrow. I don't really like how like the Red Angel storyline ended. But the choreography is great, and when like the gravity malfunctions and they're like going like up on top of the corridor and on the side and the way they shot it, I think they were just spinning the set around, but it looks so cool. And Jeff Russo's score is so good. Like whenever there's there's like dumb season finales that I don't like, the score is always so good. It can almost kind of trick me into like. Like when Michael's like flying in the Red Angel suit and like the score is just like so freaking good. I'm like, man, like I just can't help but like enjoy this. It's something that I've noticed in like a lot of filmmakers I don't like Michael Bay or Jerry Bruckheimer do like the really like schlocky action movies. They always get composers that can do like these epic scores that are like, I'm not a good enough filmmaker to make you feel any emotions, but the composer is going to do it with the music. So, But I think Jeff Russo's score doesn't get much appreciation. I clearly like his work more than a lot of people, but I think he's had a lot of good work in disco. A lot of like the not typical Star Trek stuff, but whenever he's doing like dark, ominous music, like the Mirror Universe stuff, or like a lot of like the Klingon stuff, that always sounds really cool.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good call out. These are massive team efforts, and the FX guys and the music guys, they're all trying to work to do the same thing, or they're working towards the same goal, even if they're getting there a little differently.
Amy, do you have any other big highlights of Star Trek Discovery that we haven't covered yet that you'd like to mention, like to get on the record before we sign off?
One thing that I do like about Discovery sort of overall is sort of their conservation philosophy, like what were the things that Book was bringing to the planet he was rescuing?
Worms.
Yeah. And then not, abusing the tardigrade like it was sentient. We need to not abuse it, and like not enslaving them, or those space whales that was endangered, so this whole idea of conservation in a time where our Earth is dying, and if we don't do something to change, it's gonna die, and then the people will die on the Earth. I really appreciate Discovery taking that stance, and I just feel it's a great philosophy to have, and I hope we get to see more of that in season 5.
I haven't heard anyone else point that out, but I think that Star Trek Discovery is the most environmentalist Star Trek show.
Yeah.
Yes.
It comes up with sort of the mycelial aliens as well, even though I think to some degree the show didn't quite have the follow-through I wanted on that, where they had to kind of really reckon with the
that was kind of confusing too. That's one thing that like sometimes Discovery can get real muddy, and it takes a while to get clarification on some of that stuff. Apparently the mycelial network was only in danger because of Culber's presence there, and then after they removed him, there was they were no longer.
But then did it get
damaging
cleaned up with his removal? Like, how did it get cleaned up?
That's what's like implied, but it doesn't. It didn't explain that very well. But
no,
at this point, the show is like, well, why do I want to mess with that? I'm doing like this other 32nd century stuff now, and It's the same thing with like there is so much confusion about like why do people blame Michael Burnham for starting the war? Like she like her mutiny really didn't start it, but I always like kind of blame her for like she killed Takuvma when her and Giorgio went to go capture him, and that's kind of that's kind of what could have stopped things. If anyone wants to be mad at her, they should be mad about that. But like what the show, it doesn't want to like go back and try to explain that stuff now. That's why I don't think we're gonna get an explanation on Calypso, on the short trek Calypso in season 5, but I think that's okay because I'm just assuming Zora had a dream. I think that's the reason why they gave her the ability to dream in season 4. So it's just, oh yeah, one time I had a dream about a dude named Kraft. That's. Dave, what about you? Anything else on Star Trek Discovery?
Just kind of skimming through my notes. I've just got odds and ends stuff to mention. Spock's beard. That's a pretty good look for him. I want to mention I liked it was something that they kind of dropped, but early on when they were a little bit more edgelord, when they had their first F-bomb, I still like it. I think it was fun. I like that it was Tilly and Stamets and Burnham hanging out and talking
That's right,
science.
Cadet. It is fucking cool.
Yep. Let's see. What else is in here? Sarek. I like Sarek's most of his appearances. I think.
James Frain did a good job.
Yeah.
Him explaining the Vulcan hello to Michael, and periodically being there as a rather kind of a kinder father to her than he was to Spock.
Very, very much.
Only because she called him out on it.
A lot of dads are nicer to their
true.
daughters than sons.
No, that's an interesting point, Fathery. There's a bunch of little things. Tilly as Captain Killy, just lots of fun moments like that. There's I could just go through there. The Saru getting the threat ganglia changing to those little dart things that he can shoot out.
Attack
Did you not
ganglia?
like?
I did not like the darts. I like the ganglia falling out, but the darts, no.
I thought that was cool. I mean, it's just a neat little visual flourish, and it kind of, I guess, emphasizes pray no longer. Let's see. I think that's most of the stuff. We in some way, shape, or form covered most of what I wanted to talk about. I think.
Word.
What about you, Fathery?
One last thing is I like Mama Burnham. I like that Michael thought that she had lost her parents, and it turned out like, no, your mom was your guardian angel all along, and she was actually there, watching your graduation from the Vulcan Science Academy and all the, big important things in your life, and she's a part of your life. And then now in the 32nd century, when, this whole crew that followed you here and said goodbye to their families, you had no reason to expect you would get this, Michael, but it turns out like, oh, your mom is here, and you actually get to like have a relationship with your mom now that you hadn't gotten to have since you were a little kid. And I think that's a wonderful thing for that poor girl who's been through so much fucking trauma over the years, of just everything she's had to endure. So I'm very happy that Michael Burnham had that, and I thought it was like really good casting. They got an actress who had a similar southern accent to Sonequa Martin Green, and I thought they had like good mother-daughter chemistry. And
Yes.
I'm hoping that we get more Mama Burnham in season 5 as well.
Yeah. Hey, what about the cinematography of Discovery and like is it the AR wall?
They gave us they get better with that it looked pretty good in season 4. It looked even better in season 1 of Strange New Worlds. It looked even better in season 2 of Strange New Worlds.
Yes.
And,
it's getting better and better, but we got that there with Discovery.
Yeah, I'm hoping like with season 5, I think they can do like some really cool stuff with it. And I think like the best AR wall shit that we've gotten is yet to be seen. We're gonna get it in a few weeks in season 5.
Yeah, like their vision of various planetary surfaces or spaceships and stuff feel very well realized. You mentioned the transworms. I think you actually see one in one episode. Is it somewhere on a beach?
It swallows Michael and then
and spits
keeps
her up.
Yeah,
but
on the beach.
Pretty cool.
It did what the spider cow did to Boimler.
Lower decks. just gnawing on him.
My only issue has ever been that it's like a little too showy at times. You know, the camera's spinning around.
They rein that in though. They get better over the years. They stop the spinniness. Amy, you used to bitch about that all the time. I remember listening to your podcast, like season 1, talking about you getting vertigo from the camera spinning around.
Every episode, I'm like, why are we spinning? And they would start upside down, and it annoyed the shit out of me.
Olin Tunde heard you, and he stopped doing that. So
thank you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to season 5 though. Y'all got me pretty excited for it. Talking about like all the things that we like in the previous 4 seasons. So I think that'll be a lot of fun. And just another thank you to the Tex-Trek Patreon supporters out there. We do appreciate it. And if you're unable to join the Patreon but still want to help out, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel and rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcast and Spotify. But Dave and I will be back next week. We're going to try to get Captain Pikachu back on the show to discuss the top 3 things we want to see in Star Trek Discovery Season 5, and 1 thing we don't want to see. So
yeah,
that might be interesting.
That'll be fun. I've got a few. I feel like I have a few like lighter answers in there too that extending beyond the 3. But yeah, we're gonna keep it the big stuff focused on 1 thing. And I think I have some things that I don't think we're gonna cross over too much, Fathery. I think we'll have some.
We're not gonna have much overlap.
Things. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Because we never know. We don't reveal these to each other.
That's right. So secretive.
And Dave and I both came up with these before we saw any of season 5, so this is going to be completely unreflective of what's actually
cheating.
In season 5. Just our hopes and fears on display for all to see. That'll be next week.
3 hopes, 1 fear. That's
3 hopes, 1 fear next week.
Yeah.
And then 2 discos the week after that. So math teacher, what does that add up to? What's the answer to that? What's the solution to that problem? Maybe someone will figure it out by next week, but
the answer is that's the power of math, people.
There you go. Connected back to Star Trek Discovery. It all ties together.
That's right.
It is fucking cool.
Well, it'll be fucking cool next week when we talk about more Star Trek Discovery. And until then, as always, live long and prosper, y'all.
Listen to the Tex-Trek podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or at tex-trek.com. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/tex-trek. And follow Fathery on Twitter at TXTrek. Please support us by liking our videos and subscribing to our channel on YouTube. Thank you and take care.